Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Voices of Mishago. I am sitting here with Bob Perotti, and unless you're from Italy, and then you would pronounce it how, Bob?
Perotti.
Perotti. Okay, so I'm sitting here with Bob. Judy is busy with some work inside, so it's just Bob and I and Ziggy. So we're just getting going on our episode here. So Bob, I think you were probably one of the first first neighbors that Emily and I met when we came up here. So it was just, it's been a great friendship. We've so valued you. You're just a couple of houses down. So for those that are listening that can't imagine this would be the case, but aren't familiar with where your home is at, you're on Sunset here.
Lot number 6.
Lot number 6. And so that is, basically midpoint here on the bluff, just overlooking just a beautiful view here of Lake Michigan. And you're here for the bulk of the year, but you and I were just talking in a preamble before we got going here that you guys will be heading for some warmer weather here shortly, right? And where do you head to?
South Carolina, Myrtle Beach. Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. We'll be there for 5 months this year.
5 months, okay. And I know in early years when Emily and I first met you, you and Judy would head to California in those days. Yeah. And where would you go in California?
Palm Springs.
Palm Springs.
Always in Palm Springs.
Always in Palm Springs. So you would get plenty of nice weather to be able to be golfing and enjoying the nice weather there. But more recent, you've kind of changed that to
closer to home, easier to get to, less expensive. We have lots of friends from Grand Rapids that go there as well, so it's worked out very well for us.
Nice.
This will be our second year now.
So you guys will be packing up and heading out there in
the end of October.
End of October here. So, and take us back to the early years. Let's start with first. How did you and Judy first hear about Mishago? What was life like for you guys? I mean, what were you doing? Where were you at? Kind of take us back to the beginning.
I started working at a company in Chicago, and the man who hired me was Tom Deishberg.
Well, yeah, we know Tom.
He was one of the developers in Mishago. And over the course of time, Tom and I became pretty good friends. I actually eventually got his job when he left the company and went to work for somebody else.
So this is Tom Sr. to be...
Tom Deishberg Sr.,
Yep.
one of the developers in Mishago Beach.
Yep.
When I first started coming up here with Tom, it was to learn as much as I can about building cabins, because I was an accountant, so was Tom, but Tom had experience building, and he basically built a lot of these cabins. Originally, they got packages from Lindahl Cedar Homes, and you follow all the material was cut, and all you had to do is put it together. And after I got experience doing that with a number of houses, they started to build houses by cutting the lumber themselves, and it was a lot cheaper to do it that way.
Sure.
So I started coming up, I'd say about, 63, about 68, I started coming up with Tom and a couple of his sons, and they'd be working on houses on the weekend, and I would help.
Nice.
Just so I could learn.
And back then in 1968, give us an idea of what was here, what wasn't here. I mean, was it just the first handful of cottages at that time?
Well, there was quite a few by then. 68. Most of the houses. I worked on that house, the Benny House, which is now the Benny House.
Yep.
It actually was originally owned by Tom's mother-in-law, Mrs. Fagan. I worked on that house in the late 60s. I also worked on the Dwyer House I spent some time working on the Dwyer house. Now, when I say working, I was a helper.
Sure.
Tom was teaching me what he could about building. The whole idea was because in 1968 I bought the lot up here from Tom.
I see.
And the whole idea was that eventually we would build a cottage on the land. And so the whole idea was to try to learn as much as I could. So there were quite a few houses here. The Chappetts owned their house. Your house was built.
Okay.
The Faheys were here.
Uh-huh.
The original farmhouse that Quinn Sutton owns, I'm talking Quinn Senior,
Right.
was the original house on the property.
That was just the first house that was ever here.
Ever built. That was built during Civil War in 1862.
Wow. So we're talking 100 years plus, 106 years prior to your
Right.
inaugural Mishago experience.
Further down the house on the other side of Quinn, which is owned by the what's the name of the family? Schuessler.
Schuesslers,
The
yes.
Schuesslers.
Yeah.
That house was there.
Oh.
So was the original house that Rick and Georgie now own.
Right.
That house was there. They originally bought that house with his parents.
Yes.
And there was the Jukich house. I worked on that house. The Dwyer house. The Headley house, which was originally owned by, I think, one of the Caruso brothers. The Caruso actually owned your house originally.
Right. Yep.
I believe the Tackman house was there. That's pretty much it for here.
So the Nichols house, which is now owned by jointly by the Deschberg and Dwyer, the Nichols.
Chappett.
I'm sorry, Deschberg Chappett.
That was built in the 1920s. That house was built in the 1920s. That house was here.
That house was here. Okay. Yep.
That house was here, and it was owned by the Nichols family.
Right.
The way it worked, just to give you a little history of how the whole Mishago thing worked, the three partners, Tom Deschberg, Joe Chappett, and Bill Nichols, bought this property, as I understand it, from the Chappett family.
Okay.
The Furmans, who were related to the Chappetts.
Okay.
I believe that Joe Chappett's wife, Pat, her name is Furman.
Uh-huh.
And her family owned this property.
Interesting. So that's where, of course, we get Furman Drive.
Right.
Okay.
And so the property was bought by the three. They started coming up here. Their wives actually started coming up here first.
That seems to be kind of a common theme that I'm learning in these Voices of Mishago interviews. Is time after time, it's the women, the wives, that kind of
they were young girls, and they were coming up here with the Furman family.
Sure.
Okay, because they were friends.
They see something, they love it, and then sometimes
Pat Furman, Colette Fagan, and Marie. I'm not sure what Marie's maiden name was. I can't remember that. Marie Nichols. But she had before that she had a different name. Anyway, they started coming up as teenagers with the Furman family, and eventually, and Tom and Joe and Bill were all friends with each other. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, after they got married, and then Tom would come up occasionally, and Bill would come up occasionally with their wives. And and then the Furmans wanted to put the property up for sale, I guess. Mm-hmm. And these guys got together and decided to buy it.
Interesting. So
60 acres, 2 homes. The little old farmhouse, the original farmhouse, and then, of course, the Nichols, which is now the Chappett Deschberg house. Mm-hmm. They bought all of that property. Now, what happened after that, I don't have too much information. Probably John and other Deschbergs would have more information about what happened then. I can take it from about the time in '68 when they decided to, they already had subdivided the place. Mm-hmm. There were 3 or 4 houses down on the beach. Well, more than that, probably 5 or 6, including John Muckna was down there. they got the idea of forming an association, okay, and this way the maintenance of the property could be turned over to an association board.
Sure.
Okay, and there were 10 of us that actually signed the incorporation, including myself. Signed the incorporation of the association. They came up with a lawyer prepared the based on the boys' input. They prepared the bylaws and some other building code rules, and formed an association. We all 10 of us signed it, and incorporated it, and I want to say it was sometime around 71, 72 when it actually happened.
Okay.
I mean, I think it took time to work this all out.
Sure.
Get all the paperwork in order. But I think it was sometime in the early 70s that the actual association, Mushago Beach Estates, took hold.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to that, of course, each of the men of the three decided and chose certain amount of lots for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Bill chose the house.
Sure.
He wanted the house and a lot on the beach. And Tom basically just had, I think, the lot on the beach and maybe one up here. And then Joe had, I think, 2 lots on the beach and then the lot up on top.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, to get back to the story where they incorporated, or the association, it was at one time just called Mushago Builders.
Okay.
Which is a combination of Michigan and Chicago. That's how they came up
Right.
with that. And they incorporated the Mushago Beach Estates and set up a board of directors, and then went from there. And I believe all 3 men, Bill and I think Bill or Tom, I'm not sure which, was the first president of Mushago Beach Estates.
Mm-hmm.
But all 3 men were on the board.
Okay.
I came on the board later. I didn't come on the first board, but couple of years later, I think I was on the board. That was my first stint on the board.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually became president of the board at one point, and then I did another stint on the board later, and more recently where I was treasurer. Anyway, the board existed, and we took over basically, and the men donated the wells and the roads to the association.
Okay.
Because they owned the roads too. Individually we all owned our individual lots, but the roads were all owned by Mushago Builders. So
Sure.
they donated the roads and the well system to the association.
Okay. So now the 3 founding families and yourself, everybody's home base is in Illinois, correct?
The 3, yeah.
You're right. Yeah. And so people were, everyone was just during the summer season or whatnot coming up here and
pretty much just a summer association.
Yep.
Open up April 15th, close on October 15th.
Okay.
Now, probably the big house, which ended up being the Nichols house, that could be used more than just the 6 months, because it had its own well and its own heating system. But the little cabin, or the little original house, could also be used in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part, it was a summer association. All of us that built. Eventually, I built my house with Tom Deishberg and his sons, and a few of my friends and my brothers.
And when did that start? So you originally started coming up here in 68.
68.
Approximately when did you guys start?
73.
73. Okay. So take us back to that time. So was that an easy move? I mean, I've heard stories like Rick and Georgie and I were visiting, and one of the comical things was that, if I recall the story correctly, I might have to go back and listen to the episode of Voices of Mushago, but I want to say that they didn't have a primary home themselves. They were just into an apartment, and I think Georgie was pregnant, and here they were buying a second property for.
I know.
So it was kind of comical and bold, and obviously everything worked out wonderfully. But what was it like for you guys back then? Was it an easy transition to 73 to start building, or?
Well, Judy and I already had a home. We bought a home in '73.
Mm-hmm.
A home back in Park Ridge, Illinois.
Okay.
And that's what we bought. That's a suburb near O'Hare Airport.
Mm-hmm.
We bought that home in '73, I believe in the spring of '73, and we started building this house, the original cabin, in August of '73.
Oh wow! So you've got your primary home and starting your cottage same year of '73.
Right.
Interesting.
Now, we didn't do a Lindahl cedar home. By then Tom was building homes from scratch.
Right.
Much of the lumber I actually secured for 3 homes at the time. Tom was building a home for the White family. Dr. White was not in this subdivision, but a little south of here.
Okay.
So I secured a load of lumber, cedar, from a company called Weyerhaeuser in British Columbia, and it was the equivalent of, I'm going to say, about $14,000 or $15,000 worth of lumber for 3 homes.
Wow. So roughly $5,000 per home.
Well, it's actually, White's house was bigger.
Okay.
The third house was Vito DeFlorio, way in the back.
Sure.
So Vito built his home, we built this one, and Tom was building the White House. And we bought the lumber I actually found the lumber at Weyerhaeuser. And I bought all of the rest of the materials for this. I kind of acted as a general myself.
Yeah.
With Tom's assistance, of course. He was a great help. But Tom ran the job. He basically was in charge of the construction.
Mm-hmm.
We got the plans I believe we got it from Joe Chapman for this particular house.
Okay.
He had got the plans himself and built a house. I think they built the house 2 doors down from them.
Okay.
That was originally the Crawford's house.
Okay.
It was the same style as this.
Mm-hmm.
And we just Joe gave us the plans.
Now those styles, you use the term styles. If I recall from somebody here, it might have been John Chapman or somebody described there was a name given to a certain style of kind of like
Right.
the Oslo or this or
so this one didn't have a name.
Okay.
As far as I remember, there was no name for this particular house style. It might be on the plans. If I dig up the old plans, and maybe it says something, but I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
They used those names because those names are what Lindahl called them.
I see.
Okay?
Yeah.
It was their plan, and that's the model that they had.
Ah, gotcha.
But for this house, no.
Right.
Anyway, we built over the course of 26 weekends. We started in August. We got it under roof by October.
Wow.
And then all my brothers and my friends and Tom Deesberg and his children pretty much stopped working. Judy and I continued to work on odds and ends
Okay.
until it started to snow in December.
Wow.
And we stopped working. Then we came back in April, again doing it on weekends. I hired all the subcontractors. Pause it a minute. Let's put her inside. So then I hired subcontractors. John Chapman, who was maybe 18 years old, did the wiring for this house.
That's fun.
I hired a fellow by the name of Art Lindquist, to do all the finish carpentry.
Okay. I think I recall you talking with Emily and I about the finished carpentry, how talented he was.
Oh, yeah, he was incredibly talented. I tried hanging the door. It took me all day to hang one door, and I thought, no, I can't do this. My brother Roger and I built the deck, the original deck.
Okay.
Not this one, but the original deck. My brother Roger and I did that. But the finished carpentry and the plumbing, I'll be darned if I can remember the name of the plumber now. But I hired a plumber as well. So the plumber and the electrical and the finished carpentry was all done subcontract.
Right.
And by July 1st, we had the house finished.
Wow. So inside of a year, if you started the August of the previous year,
Yeah.
and wow,
we had it finished. And of course, I was totally out of money at that point. As a matter of fact, Tom Biesberg lent me some money, or Chicago Builders did, I guess, just so I could get through the construction. Because back in those days, the banks up here would not give you all the money that they promised you in a loan unless they saw a finished product. Okay. And because too many of these cabins were started apparently up here, and then people didn't finish them because they ran out of money.
Yeah.
And they just sat idly, and they never were finished. So the bank up here was willing to give me the money. However, I had to get it under roof and finish first.
Right.
Which seems kind of crazy. So Chicago Builders actually lent me the money.
Okay.
It's a very nice thing for them to do. And as soon as we finished the house, I got the money from the bank, and I paid them back.
Nice.
And I paid some interest, which is fine. Anyway, that was kind of way it went from this house. Yeah.
We are pausing and resuming, so we just have some Ziggy patrol going on here. So Ziggy's such a wonderful dog, but has some, he wants some attention. So, so you were able to kind of just scratch your way through to the finish line, and that was, so that would have been in 74.
74. Yeah. And we immediately had to rent the place because we needed money.
Sure.
I now had 2 mortgages to pay, not just one. So I needed the money, so we started renting it. We rented it, I think, for 8 or 9 weeks over the course of maybe 2 or 3, 4 years, maybe something like that. Until I finally got caught up in a better position to be better able to afford all my expenses. And we had renters like Dick Klinkner rented from us a couple of times, and probably some other people that live in here. I just can't remember all the name. I think the Taylors rented from us.
Oh, interesting.
I think. Anyway, that's how we got through the first few years, is by renting a place.
So you got the place in 74, and you continue to use it, enjoy it. Home base is back in Illinois. You're coming up here, and then at some point you did remodel addition because
that's the house was built to be an all year round house. Okay, we built this house double wall construction. None of these cottages are, for the most part, are double wall construction.
Ours certainly isn't.
No, it's a single wall.
Yeah.
But we decided eventually we'd want to be able to live here.
Yeah.
So we put double construction with insulation in the walls. Okay. And so when we were when we were thinking about retirement in 2007, 2008, we decided we'd live up here, but we had to remodel it. And I hired a contractor by the name of Glenn Anderson. I had an architect, I forget his name, who drew up the plans on what the addition was like and how it was going to be configured. We basically moved out of the house, and they rebuilt the whole house completely. All new windows. The walls, of course, were okay, but then we put siding on it. We had to build a roof on top of a roof.
Right.
Because the roof itself wasn't strong enough. It wasn't high enough with
Sure. And this original. So now, for those that haven't been to your home or been inside the home, like I of course have, there's the upstairs. You have a beautiful spiral staircase that goes up to kind of bedrooms and bathrooms and stuff like that. But the original did not have that, correct? The original was one level?
No, the original was 2 levels.
Was it? Okay.
Oh, yeah. There were 4 bedrooms up there.
Okay.
Up 3 bedrooms up, 1 bedroom down. There was a bath and a half down here. And what we did is we took the middle bedroom, half of it went to the master suite, and then put another bath upstairs, another full bath.
Okay.
But there was a spiral staircase, but it would be considered illegal now.
Okay.
It was real tiny. It was only a 4-foot staircase. This is much bigger. and much heavier. So the house, we bought all new flooring, all new kitchen, all new bathrooms. Everything was completely redone. I spent much more money than I did for the original house, but it was what we wanted to do.
And it's gorgeous.
And then we moved up here in 2009, and I retired from one job I had at a hospital, and I continued with my practice, and I commuted for 2 years. I had a practice in Evanston, Illinois, and I would leave on Monday, come back on Thursday, and I did that for 2 years.
Let's transition into that because I found it interesting with you and Judy and kind of your backgrounds. For those that aren't familiar with your backgrounds, you've had kind of more than one career, so to speak. Can you talk us through you and Judy?
Well, working with Tom Duisberg, I was an accountant.
Right.
I have an undergraduate degree in accounting. And then in 92, decided to retire from accounting, which I did, and went back, got a master's degree in social work, and then became a psychiatric social worker for about 20 years.
Interesting.
Yeah. Judy was always a psychiatric social worker.
So
That was her career.
And she
I just joined her.
Okay. Is that what, because that's kind of a strong change to go from accounting to psychiatric work.
Oh, yeah.
Was it, obviously it was influenced by, Judy being in that field, and you saw some things in that field that you thought you might enjoy. And
we had a lot of friends in the field.
Okay.
Because of her connections. She belonged to a couple of associations, a couple of partnerships. So we had a lot of friends that we socialized with, and I hear stories and I talk to people, and I got very interested in it. And that's when I decided I was going to retire from accounting and pursue that, and I did, and it worked out very well.
Yeah, I just think it's fascinating. So many times, people, they are vested in some sort of career, and if they love it, great. If they hate it, some people just grudgingly plow it out day after day. But in your case, you kind of had an interest and a bit of a passion for this psychiatric
this new work. Yeah, I did. It wasn't like accounting was a bad career. It was a very good career. I don't begrudge myself for doing it. But I got to the point where I wanted to do something else. I fulfilled myself with that career. I did very well in it, and I just didn't. It wasn't for me anymore. And I was in my 40s, and I said, "Why not? I can do it."
Yeah. And then Judy, she was, because you had to do this hard transition, meaning you had to go back to schooling and so forth. So then
for 2 years.
Yeah.
For 2 years, she supported the family.
Yeah.
Which is fine.
Yeah.
Well, she was able, and it worked out very well.
That's fantastic. I just found that to be such a interesting and I think a great thing for people to learn from. Again, if people just are one and done with their career, then great. But if there's so much that you can learn and do different and add value to other people. Like you said, you had a good long career in accounting, and then you transitioned, had another good long career in the psychiatric work. So let's talk about, some times up here. I know you've got, of course, so many friends here in Mishago, and you've got a lot of activities that you do around here. I know you do golfing. Is there anything that kind of stands out for you and or Judy up here for people that maybe people that are in Mishago, or maybe people new to Mishago that they don't know about certain restaurants, certain golf courses, certain attractions in this area?
Well, back in the old days, the property in the back, there's a 60 acres in the back that were still owned by the original owners. Joe Chappett, Tom Duisberg, and Bill Nichols each had, besides the developed part, I think it's 15 or 20 acres of developed part of Mishago. There's 60 acres in the back that each of those men had 20 acres. Well, Tom Deesberg had the 20 acres that was farmland, and then Bill and Joe had the 20 acres each that was wooded. Okay, and over the course of time, the woods in the back were a place where people could enjoy walk through the woods, and paths developed, which was really nice. And so we all had the two men allowed us to go back there and use the property to walk the trails, and then eventually a lot of people up here bought their kids dirt bikes, and pretty soon everybody, or not everybody, many people had dirt bikes. So we set up a trail, an actual dirt bike trail with signs making it one direction, and our daughter had a dirt bike, Judy had a dirt bike, I had a dirt bike. So we would enjoy the property in the back, riding our motorcycles. And that was a very fun thing to do back then.
It's interesting, I've heard you talk about that a bit in the past when Emily and I would come on over here, and you and Judy would graciously host us for a kind of a cocktail hour here on your deck, and looking out over Lake Michigan for a sunset, and we would hear the stories of that. And it was just recently, actually, it was at the farewell party for John Muckna this summer here in 2024, where kind of the party after the party, there was a number of us that were just sitting around after everybody else had kind of cleared out, and it was, some of that generation would have been the kids of that generation. So I'm talking like Ken and Kathy, I could go around the horn on who was there. It's just a handful of people that were sitting around after Muckna's party, just eating a few of the leftover burgers and brats and drinking a beer. And they were talking about how, when they were in their early years, I'm going to guess maybe in their 20s and so forth, that was a very popular spot. There's that big kind of a pit back there, kind of
yeah, we had a little jump back there. Actually.
Yeah. And they would go back there.
It was cool. It was a lot of fun.
And they were saying, this would be back probably, I think, in the 80s, because they talked about having boom boxes, right? Those big music boxes that you would kind of walk around with on your shoulder. And they would go and sit in the bottom of that pit back there, maybe have a bonfire. But because it was in this pit, all the noise and everything didn't permeate out and disturb the parents and everybody. And they would have they were parties, but they were, not, big swashbuckling parties. They would just basically gather back there and just have fun and listen to music. And
my daughter's generation, and she spent a lot of summers up here with my wife, and I commuted on weekends. There were lots of kids. I mean, this is a kind of a lot of people here are Catholic, so there's lots of kids. The Deesbergs had 6 kids, and the Dwyers had 7 kids, I think, and the Bennys had 7 kids.
And the Fahey's right next door.
Fahey's had 8 kids.
Right.
So that generation, our daughter's generation, when they were teenagers, there were bonfires on the weekends. The kids were all down there, and
a lot of good memories, a lot of good fun.
I know that Jane really loved going down there and being with her friends. So she made a lot of friends up here. So that was another activity. The other thing we did a lot, many of us got involved with, was sailboats.
Right.
Many of us had sailboats. I had 2, actually. I bought a small Sunfish first, and then eventually I bought a Hobie Cat. And the predominant boat up here was a Hobie Cat. And we used to have Hobie Cat races. And where John Muckna would put out buoys on a triangular basis, and we'd have races. And Johnny Muckna would usually win, or Dave Tackman was a very good sailor, one of Marge's sons. He was a good sailor, and he often won as well, because he was lightweight, and he took a lot of risks. So we had a lot of fun doing that. I mean, plus we kept the sailboats right on the beach. We just pulled them up, and when we wanted them, we took them back, and then we would sail them when we could. We'd sail them down to Stony Lake and take them out of the water at Stony Lake. But sometimes it was just not possible to sail them down. Either there was no wind, it was too cold, whatever. So we'd have to drag the things up the bluff where the public beach is.
Wow, that couldn't have been easy.
That wasn't easy.
Because these are 14 and 16 foot.
60, most of them were 16 foot.
Sure.
Yeah, most of them were 16 foot. So yeah, we had a lot of good times with the sailboats. Yeah, and it's a very close-knit community. People were friends. We were all friends with each other. Everybody knew everybody else. A lot of people have been here a long time.
That's what, Emily and I bought here, as you know, in the fall of 2015. So I guess that's now 9 years ago. But
You're the third owner.
Yes, the third owner. It was
Caruso, Don Caruso.
Yep.
Not Don, John. John Caruso, and then the German fellow. I forget his name right now.
Gosh, I'm drawing a blank on it as well. But in 2015, and the thing that just hit us so strongly, and the thing that you're speaking of, and what we certainly hope to continue here in Mishago, is that sense of community. That friendship. This is not a disparate bunch of random cottage owners. This is really, it's a little cliche, but it's a family. And like any family, it's you have some squabbles here and there once in a while, but very rare and lightweight for the most part. And on whole, an incredibly tight knit, friendly, congenial, just warm family environment. And I think it goes back to those founding families, those original, the 1960 somethings, and what
many of the homes, the families here are actually now up to the third generation. For example, the Fays next door to me, often Eugene or Jean and Rosemary's grandchildren would come up because they're adults now.
Right.
Okay. And just 2 weekends ago, one of I believe it was Brendan's daughter was here with one of her cousins.
Mm-hmm.
They come up for the weekend. So the kids, the third generation, in many cases, are now using the cabins.
Right.
And that's nice. Even Deesburg is another example. Tom Deesburg, and then his son Tom Deesburg Jr. And now his son Don Deesburg III, with his kid, come up here.
Right.
Okay? So another reason I think they bought the Nichols house, because they wanted another house for backup.
That's right.
For overflow of guests, because you can't accommodate everybody all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just a really, it just struck us so strongly here about just the friendly nature of this community. It's really something special.
And there's been many family reunions up here.
Yeah.
We've had two ourselves. One in, I think, 94, and then another one in 97. The 97 one was the big one. I had 60 people up here.
Wow.
I rented 5 different cabins from other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I had 60 people over the course of about 10 days. Not everybody came for 10 days. Some only came for 3 or 4 days. But I had cousins from all over the country come here for that reunion. It was a wonderful time. I know that Joe, the president, Joe Twist.
Yeah, Joe Twist.
He has reunions.
Yes.
I know he's had a bunch of people up. I think Beverly and Tom Taylor have people up every year for a week.
Yeah. In fact,
and other people have done reunions as well.
Well, and up until I interviewed Dick and Nancy, I thought Emily and I were the only ones that had a wedding up here, but Dick and Nancy had a bit of a...
Well, they got married in D.C., but then they had a celebration.
Whereas Emily and I, and for those that aren't familiar, right next to you, right. To the north, between you and Quinn, is a lot that was owned by, well, at that time it was Maureen Nichols in the Blue House.
Right.
And she and her family, her daughter in particular, graciously gave us permission to have what turned out, as you recall, because you and Judy and Dick and Nancy and some others at Deesburg's were here on your deck watching the ceremony.
That was cool.
It was so fun. I mean, and to be able to have Mishago for family reunions, for have in our case, a wedding celebration. We had the ceremony here, and then had the reception in downtown Grand Rapids. But it's absolutely a phenomenal place for that. So then,
it's a nice location for it.
It's incredible. One of the things that people might find interesting too, I know I sure did, is that you and Judy kind of had a life of some adventure, particularly with scuba diving. Well, there's two things that stand out in my mind. One thing is, you mentioned about the motorbikes and stuff like that. One time when Emily and I were talking with you about fishing and so, you shared a story about you and Judy going to, I think it was the Pier Marquette, to do some fishing, and you would ride, or you would somehow rig up your motorbike to kind of do the so there's that, and then you're fishing. Maybe you can kind of unpack that story, and then tell us a little bit about your scuba diving and places in the world that you've been and so forth.
Oh, sure. We got into scuba diving in the early 90s. I think it was actually 1990. But we did most of our scuba diving in the Caribbean. Cozumel, Bonaire, places like that. You know, the islands where the water is warm.
Yeah.
But we have occasionally gone scuba diving in Lake Michigan. Specifically, Eddie Deesburg, one of Tom's sons, and I went scuba diving in Lake Michigan. Lake Michigan is very deceiving. It could be the middle of August and the water is 75 degrees, but when you go down 50 feet, you suddenly pass the thermocline, and now you're in 52 degrees. So you can't go down without a very thick wetsuit or a dry suit. We both, Eddie and I, had wetsuits, which are 6 mils. We did a number of dives around here. Actually, there's more wrecks off of Chicago than there are up here.
Wow.
That are intact. There's a lot of. I did a lot of diving from Chicago rather than from here. But most of our diving, Judy and I together, she wouldn't dive. She didn't want to dive in Lake Michigan. I can't say it's a blimmer. We dove in the Caribbean for years. And did a lot of diving all over the place.
And these dives, either in Lake Michigan or in the Caribbean, it was a lot of like wrecks and structures, or was it like coral reefs?
In the Caribbean, it's coral.
Yeah.
And fish.
Yeah.
Here, there aren't. You see fish, but it's about diving on wrecks.
Right.
Yeah. The best wreck that I can think of that I dove on is called the Wells Burt, and it's about 3 miles off the coast of Evanston, Illinois, where we lived.
Okay.
Beautiful wreck. The hull is still intact, sitting in about 55, 60 feet of water.
Wow.
Beautiful.
Very pristine condition.
Very pristine condition. And it's what changed in Lake Michigan is that they introduced the coho.
Right.
And they in the alewives, I think, I don't know, some other variety of fish that started to eat all the particles in the lake. So the visibility in Lake Michigan went from being like 25 feet to like 50 feet.
Wow.
Because of these fish that would eat all these particles floating in the water. So the visibility became almost as good as the Caribbean.
I'll be darned.
But that was another activity we did up here. Motorcycling, sailing, scuba diving. We did a lot of golf.
I was going to say, I know you to be an avid golfer. I've certainly enjoyed golfing with you at Channel Inn and then up in Hart.
A regular foursome was Tom Deesburg, myself, Jack Benny, and Dick Linkner. We had a lot of competitions, and I'll tell you, we played for nickels. and whoever lost had to buy milkshakes at Lipka's. It was a lot of fun. We played a lot of golf, and we mostly played up at White Lake Country Club, which is a private country club that was, Dick was a member, I think, for a while. Tom Deesburg was a member for a long time. and maybe briefly John was a member. I was never a member. I was always a guest. Lots of golf over at White Lake.
We've driven past that. It's a beautiful looking club. It's on the south end, kind of the west end of the south end of White Lake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not an expensive membership. There are no equity. I think there are equity members, but that's a closed group.
Okay.
That own the course.
Mm-hmm.
But any individual can buy a membership for a year.
Ah.
It's probably around $1,500,
mm-hmm.
and that's play as much golf as you want.
Wow.
And like I say, Tom Deesberg was a member, so was Dick Klinkner, and we would play, and we would play as guests.
Yeah.
And we'd pay the guest fee, which was like $15-20 for years.
Mm-hmm.
And we walked. We always walked.
Sure.
We never rode carts. We always walked.
What's your favorite golf course if you have one in this general, say within an hour radius?
I like Colonial up in Hunt. That's my
Colonial.
favorite course.
Yep.
That is a beautiful golf course.
Mm-hmm.
I love that golf course. Old Channel's nice. For a while, Grandview was pretty nice, but kind of went downhill. It got bought up by the J&J group over at
the ranch over there.
The ranch over there. They bought the property and they'll let it go. I understand they're trying to put some money in it now, which they should be able to afford because they make all this money from this concert, the Electric Forest concert.
Oh, yeah. Geez, that's a big deal, the Electric Forest. It's, I don't know how many thousands and thousands of participants come up for that electronic forest.
They get 40,000 people there.
Wow.
So that's a big moneymaker for them, and it actually has earned some money for the town of Rothbury too. They made some improvements in Rothbury with the money they've earned from the concerts. And now it's just one concert a year, which is fine with most of the neighbors because it's pretty loud. We can actually hear the drums from here.
You can, particularly if that wind shifts at all. You can almost feel that bass beat on your chest. I mean, it's so strong.
It's pretty strong, yeah. So, Mishago Beach has been really a good place to live. It's been a good place for us to enjoy summers, and now pretty much 8 months a year,
mm-hmm.
for us. We love it here. We always have, and the goal probably is to pass it on to our kids,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're kind of a middle generation, Tom Deesberg was like a generation older.
Right.
Bill and Tom and Joe were a generation older than I. And then there's some people that have, we're some people that are half generation older, half generation younger,
Mm-hmm.
We have a granddaughter and her fiance are coming up next weekend, which we're looking forward to.
Nice.
And then right after that, we're going to leave for the winter.
And you head to warmer temperatures, buttoning it up here, and let the cold winds come sweeping across Lake Michigan, and you guys will be snug as a bug on some golf course in South Carolina. That ain't all bad.
A lot of golf courses in South Carolina. Myrtle Beach has got probably 30, 40 golf courses.
Yeah.
And they offer really great deals over the winter.
Wow.
So,
and then you're back up here in April.
We'll be back around April 2nd, April 3rd, something like that.
Yeah.
So, looking forward to that trip. We always do.
Well, great. Well, we'll kind of wrap on this episode of Voices of Mishago. I know Emily and I have grown to know you and Judy and Ziggy quite well, but for those that don't know you as well as we've been fortunate to get to know you, now they know a little bit more of your story, of your origin story here, and kind of your life and times here at Mishago. So I sure appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me here before heading to South Carolina. And with that, we'll wrap this up on this episode.
My pleasure.
Thanks again, Bob.
All right.